Welcome back, everyone, to another special weekend episode of Let's Learn About Bangladesh Revolution 2.0. I'm your host, Bangladesh, and I'm thrilled to dive into a deep, thought-provoking journey today. If you caught yesterday's episode, Sparks and Courage, The Roots of Bangladesh Revolution 2.0, you know we're exploring one of the most transformative moments in recent history, the student-led uprising in Bangladesh that shook the foundations of a long-standing regime. Today, we're going bigger and bolder for our weekend special, unpacking the layers of what's being called Bangladesh Revolution 2.0. We'll dive into the myths, the propaganda, and the truths that have been buried under headlines. We'll talk about the so-called fascist regime of Sheikh Hasina and her Awami League, the accusations of violence, and the narrative being pushed by outlets like the Indian Express. Spoiler alert, we're going to challenge some of those claims, including the idea that Hindus were targeted by Muslims, and instead shine a light on reports of violence against Muslim women during Hasina's rule. This is a long episode, so grab a cup of tea, settle in, and let's unpack the revolution that's reshaping Bangladesh. By the end, you'll see why this movement is about more than just ousting a leader, it's about rewriting a nation's future. Let's get started. Segment 1, Setting the Stage. What was Bangladesh Revolution 2.0? Let's start by grounding ourselves in what Bangladesh Revolution 2.0 actually is. In August 2024, Bangladesh witnessed a seismic shift, a mass uprising, led primarily by students, that toppled the 15-year rule of Sheikh Hasina and her Awami League party. This wasn't just a protest, it was a revolution born out of years of frustration, sparked by a controversial quota system for government jobs but fueled by deeper grievances, corruption, authoritarianism, and economic stagnation. For 16 years, Sheikh Hasina's government was described by many as an earthquake shaking the very soul of Bangladesh. Nobel laureate Muhammad Yunus, who now leads the interim government, called it exactly that, a continuous tremor of oppression. The protests that began in July 2024 weren't just about jobs, they were a cry against a regime accused of stifling dissent, rigging elections, and fostering a cult-like grip on power. The Awami League, founded by Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, Hasina's father, has deep roots in Bangladesh's 1971 liberation war. It's a party that carries the legacy of Bengali nationalism and secularism, commanding a significant 40% vote share even today. But under Hasina, critics argue it became a tool of cultural fascism, sidelining the majority Bengali Muslim population and aligning with controversial groups like Hafizat-e-Islam. By August 5, 2024, the protests reached a tipping point. Hasina fled to India, and the interim government, led by Yunus, stepped in. But this revolution isn't just about her exit, it's about what comes next. How did we get here? What's the truth behind the narratives? And why are we hearing conflicting stories about violence and minorities? Let's dig deeper. Segment 2, The Myths and Propaganda, Unpacking Hasina's fascist regime. Now, let's tackle the big accusations head-on. Sheikh Hasina and her Awami League have been labeled fascist by critics, including the student-led National Citizen Party and even some international voices. But what does that mean? And how much of this is rooted in fact versus propaganda? First, let's talk about Hasina's rule. For 15 years, she was Bangladesh's longest-serving prime minister, winning a historic fourth term in 2024. Her supporters point to stability, economic growth, and infrastructure development. But critics paint a darker picture, a regime marked by extrajudicial killings, forced disappearances, and the suppression of political opponents. Muhammad Yunus himself has called her government authoritarian, accusing it of crushing dissent. One of the most contentious claims is about the treatment of minorities, particularly Hindus, who make up about 10% of Bangladesh's population. Outlets like the Indian Express and other Indian media have pushed a narrative that since Hasina's ouster, Hindus have been targeted by Muslim mobs, with temples attacked and lives lost. India, where Hasina is now in exile, has raised concerns about communal violence, citing 2,000 incidents between August 4th and August 20th, including 9 Hindu deaths, according to the Bangladesh Hindu-Buddhist-Christian Unity Council. But here's where we need to pause and question the narrative. These reports often frame the violence as Muslims attacking Hindus, painting a picture of religious chaos. Yet, there's little evidence to support the claim that Hindus were systematically killed by Muslims post-Hasina. In fact, some sources suggest the violence was more complex, targeting Awami League members, regardless of religion, in a wave of retribution after Hasina's fall. Over 200 people died in the unrest, mostly Awami League activists and police, not specifically Hindus. Now, let's flip the script. There are allegations that during Hasina's regime, Muslim women faced horrific violence, including rape and murder, at the hands of extremist groups tied to her government. These claims are less amplified in mainstream media, particularly in Indian outlets, which some argue are biased due to Hasina's close ties with India. For example, there are reports of land grabs and extortion by Awami League leaders targeting minorities, including Hindus, which complicates the narrative that Hasina was a protector of minority rights. So, what's going on here? Is this a case of Indian media, like the Indian Express, pushing a pro-Hasina, anti-revolution narrative to destabilize the interim government? Or is there truth to the concerns about minority safety? The reality likely lies in the gray area, retribution against Awami League supporters, combined with isolated communal incidents, amplified by geopolitical agendas. But one thing is clear, the simplistic Muslims versus Hindus framing doesn't hold up under scrutiny. Let's not forget the bigger picture. Hasina's government was accused of cultural dominance, using events like Pahila Baishak to assert control over Bengali identity, sidelining the Muslim peasant majority. This fueled resentment, which exploded in the 2024 uprising. The revolution wasn't about religion, it was about justice, freedom, and breaking free from what many saw as a fascist grip. Segment 3, The Role of Youth and the New Bangladesh. If there's one thing that defines Bangladesh Revolution 2.0, it's the power of youth. This wasn't a top-down movement orchestrated by politicians, it was students, young people, who took to the streets, risking their lives to demand change. The spark? A quota system that reserved government jobs for descendants of 1971 freedom fighters, seen as a tool to favor Awami League loyalists. But the fire? That was years of pent-up frustration over unemployment, corruption, and a lack of opportunities. These young revolutionaries, many from Gen Z, used social media to organize, share stories, and expose the regime's excesses. They weren't just protesting, they were building a vision for a new Bangladesh, one that's inclusive, transparent, and free from the shadows of Hasina's rule. The National Citizen Party, born from this movement, is now pushing for reforms, including prosecuting Awami League leaders for their role in suppressing the uprising. But it's not just about tearing down the old. The interim government, led by Muhammad Yunus, is tasked with rebuilding. They've banned the Awami League, suspended its electoral registration, and are investigating war crimes tied to the 2024 protests. This is a bold move, but it's not without controversy. India, for instance, has called the ban concerning, arguing it stifles democratic freedoms. Meanwhile, Hasina, from exile, claims Yunus is the real fascist, accusing him of suppressing the liberation war's spirit. The youth, however, see this as a chance to redefine Bangladesh's identity. They're pushing for economic reforms to address the crisis left by Hasina's regime, factories closing, unemployment rising, and foreign aid like USAID being cut. They're also demanding accountability for past atrocities, including the alleged violence against Muslim women under Hasina's rule. This generation isn't just fighting for jobs, they're fighting for a future where no one is silenced, no matter their religion or background. Segment 4, The Geopolitical Angle and the Road Ahead. Bangladesh Revolution 2.0 isn't just a domestic story, it's a geopolitical chessboard. Let's talk about India's role. Hasina was a close ally of India, and her ouster sent shockwaves through New Delhi. India has raised alarms about minority safety, demanded Hasina's extradition, and even met with Yunus to push for a positive relationship. But Bangladesh's interim government isn't bowing to pressure. Yunus made his first state visit to China, India's rival, signaling a shift in alliances. This tension has fueled what some call an India-based disinformation campaign, amplifying claims of anti-Hindu violence to discredit the revolution. Hasina herself has accused Yunus of genocide and failing minorities, but these claims are met with skepticism in Bangladesh, where many see her as deflecting from her own regime's failures. Then there's the internal challenge, rebuilding a nation fractured by years of division. The interim government faces pressure to hold elections, with figures like Khalida Zia, Hasina's rival, returning to the political stage. The Bangladesh Nationalist Party, BNP, and even radical groups like Hafizat-e-Islam are vying for influence, raising questions about the revolution's direction. Will it lead to a truly democratic Bangladesh, or will new power struggles emerge? The socio-economic stakes are high. Factories are closing, inflation is soaring, and the interim government must deliver reforms to keep the youth's trust. They're also navigating sensitive issues, like gender reform proposals that have drawn threats from Islamist groups. The revolution's success depends on balancing these competing forces while staying true to its roots: justice, equality, and accountability. Segment 5, The Human Cost and a Call to Action. Let's take a moment to reflect on the human cost of this revolution. Over 200 lives were lost in the 2024 uprising, from students to police to Awami League members. Families are grieving, communities are rebuilding, and the wounds of Hasina's regime, alleged disappearances, torture, and violence, still linger. The claims of Muslim women being raped and killed by extremist groups tied to Hasina's government are particularly chilling. These stories deserve to be heard, not drowned out by geopolitical agendas. As we look forward, the question is, what can we do? For those of us outside Bangladesh, it's about amplifying the voices of the revolution, sharing the stories of the youth, questioning biased narratives, and supporting efforts to rebuild a just society. If you're in Bangladesh, it's about staying engaged, holding the interim government accountable, and ensuring the revolution's ideals aren't lost. I want to hear from you, my listeners. What do you think the future holds for Bangladesh? Have you seen propaganda shaping the narrative in your community? Drop a comment on our social media or send us an email. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, share it with someone who needs to hear the truth about Bangladesh Revolution 2.0. That's a wrap on today's special episode, Unveiling the Truth, Bangladesh Revolution 2.0 and the Myths of Hasina's Regime. We've peeled back the layers of a complex story, one of courage, betrayal, and the fight for a better future. From the student-led uprising to the myths of communal violence, we've seen how Bangladesh is at a crossroads. Next week, we'll shift gears to explore another global movement shaking things up. Stay tuned for that. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and join us for more stories that challenge the status quo. Until then, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep sparking change. This is Bangladesh, signing off.